Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Trek YT here, or Nick, back at it again with another brand new video. And in today's video, we're going to be doing a little tutorial slash, tips video on how to use depth within builds and how it can actually benefit any build ever, because depth really just adds more characteristic to a build. And without further ado, guys, let's jump right into this video. So starting off, guys, I want to really just emphasize and show the stages of depth and how it can really transform a flat wall such as this into something a lot better. So our first step to, changing something to make it look a lot better is taking this flat wall and really just adding a different block choice to it. Adding a randomized block choice into a stone, palette really just creates a very, it almost is our start to our depth. It doesn't actually add visual depth, it just kind of just makes, sets the scene for creating depth. There's no different layers, it's all one layer, but it really just sets the scene by, randomizing blocks everywhere. Really just adds a little bit more intriguing to the eye rather than just having a plain flat wall. So into our next step, we really just have to start adding in stair blocks within our wall. This is a really good trick in Minecraft because you can add depth with also keeping the wall relatively flat by just adding a random stair. Adds in this little 1 by almost like half block by 1 block depth, so it really does add just a little bit of characteristic to your flat wall that really will change it a lot. Now moving into our next step, this is a pretty important and pretty basic step into depth, is really just outlining something with a very, pillar type, column type block. Logs do that very, very well. Most builds are going to use logs as their outlining and characteristic block for, creating an emphasis, almost like a picture frame around your, main piece. Now once you have those pillars and stuff like that on the side, people often tend to add stair blocks in the corners and stuff just to add a little bit more of a rounding edge rather than just a random 90-degree angle. It just adds a little bit more characteristic to your build, and it's also adding some more layers. As you can see right now, we're rocking about, let's say 1 layer, then you can almost call this a second layer because it has another layer of depth, then a third layer, and then almost a 4th layer right there. So this is just like almost 4 layers of depth, but it's relatively flat at the same time, but it just looks a lot better than that flat wall at the beginning. And then we're just continuing to add more layers of depth, adding blocks strategically. Buttons do that great on stone because they add almost like another stone effect because they protrude a little bit off the block. So that's another layer of depth right there. That's very subtle but very, very useful. Trap doors on the side of windows almost act like shutters. Those also add another little bit of depth right there. And then using glass panes over glass blocks also add another layer of depth because they add a little bit more of a, definition to your window. That is all a bunch of good blocks that you can use to add a little bit more depth. And so let's talk about what depth actually is. So the artistic definition for depth is adding something in the foreground to, create an illusion of depth within a flat wall. But in Minecraft, since we're doing stuff in a 3D, setting, we actually need to add blocks within different layers. So we really have to take our section of what we're trying to do in a build and cut it up into a bunch of different layers and add a bunch of different, layers, to create depth. I'm using the word layers a lot because when you think about it, we have 1 layer here, another layer here, another layer here. These are all at different varying, depths or lengths out from 1 block. So this is different than this. If you can look at it from here, this is shorter than that one. So that's another, layer of depth. All these together really mash up and make a really good, intriguing looking build. So let's go take a look on how depth is used in a build and how it can be negatively used in a build at the same time. So over here, I have prepared a little build with you, trying to use as much depth as possible, and then I have done the exact same build but without depth. So basically I just made absolutely almost no depth in the other build versus this build. So let's take a look at some key features of this build. So in our windows, we really have, focused in on the window as being our main focal point, and we have surrounded it with a bunch of different layers of depth by adding logs and stairs in strategic places, really rounding the edges at the same time as coming at you a little bit more, so that way you can really focus on the center 4 wide window. So that is compared to the other side when we have absolutely almost no depth. We do have a little bit of depth because I really want to keep it just a little bit there, but at the same time there is almost absolutely no depth, and it really looks weird. It really does absolutely look weird with no depth at all. And then we really tried to keep the stairs on the side really flat as much as possible, really compared to the other side, which has absolutely no depth at all. And then on the roof, it really is the same roof. You really can't do too much with not having roof depth, because there's not too much depth you can have with the roof, other than I guess adding overhangs. If you don't have an overhang, I guess that would be lacking in depth, but at the same time it really doesn't really matter too much because roofs don't have that much depth to them. You can really see that it's really weird when you look at the other build that there's absolutely no depth on it. It really just looks weird. So adding depth is just a really important feature in Minecraft and building in Minecraft to create a better looking build. Without depth, it just really doesn't look good. And depth can even be just the simplest little thing, just adding one block backwards, so just shoving like your windows and your walls one back and then outlining it with log blocks. That can be the most simplest of creating depth, but it just makes your build 100 times better because it just adds a little bit more characteristic to your build. So our final step, I'm really going to run through creating a build for you by just showing you some of the easiest little things that we do with depth. So with our first step, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and change our walls. I'm going to go ahead and replace these walls with something different. So what I have done to speed things up is I've used a command called replace. So basically what it does is it replaces a certain block, as I did with just the andesite block, and then you can replace it with other combination of blocks or whatever single block you want. So I just did 3 different stone type blocks, and then it basically evens out to 33% of each block for the most part, and it adds this really cool, I guess, technique. So if you guys, I do know I'm going to do a world edit video in the future, I just don't know when. But that'll, I guess, explain a lot of the tricks and tips that I use to do world edit. This is just one that I use when I want to randomize blocks a lot faster. So next up, what we are going to do is we're going to add some depth onto our walls. So first things first, we're just going to go ahead and throw a log on this corner, and we're going to do the same thing on this corner. And what this is creating is this little, I guess, jutting out block here, but then it adds a little character on the side as well. So we're going to do this on all 4 corners. Now, as you can see from this side right here, it has already created that outline, almost like picture frame thing that we were trying to go for in the beginning on the side walls. Now it does look a little weird on this because we have not extended the roof yet, because we are not exactly sure what we're going to do to create this little, I guess, cutoff right here to the windows. So next what we're going to do is we're probably going to work on the end sides to create, I guess, sort of a picturesque frame on the side. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab some of our stair blocks. We're just going to throw it in strategic places, trying to, I guess, break up the blocks that are 2 together like that, trying to really just create some depth. And what we're going to do is actually we're not going to put it on there because it'll create this weird, I guess, effect on the door. So we're going to go ahead and we're not going to do that because that would look bad, but we're going to do it there instead. You can also go ahead and put it upside down because that creates another different little varying of the thing. So we're going to do another upside down one right here. And so now this wall looks a little bit more interesting because we have added these, I guess, stair blocks into it, because it has added another layer of depth. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start adding in stairs and slabs and other blocks to really start creating, I guess, different depth. So one thing that I like to do sometimes is add different wood blocks, but in this scenario we're not going to do that because it's such a small build, so it just would look weird. So we're going to continue with the same type of wood block, and whenever we have a 90-degree angle, I try to normally throw at least one sort of block in there. I'm going to go with a slab on this one, but sometimes I would put stairs, maybe even like a fence like I could right here or something like that. But we're going to go ahead now, extend the roof out so we can find where we really want to keep the roof at, because it's always good to have an overhang. It really just adds a little more detail. You can also do a varying overhang like this, where it's not all flush with each other. When you just add a little bit more of, I guess, overhang on different parts, it creates another little version of depth. So then what we're going to do is we're going to try to throw some stairs in these corners right here. It adds a little bit of weird depth because it just really looks weird if we didn't have there, and maybe we'll even add some trapdoor right there just to add a little bit more depth. Up in this corner, it looks like we could add a stair, or not a stair, a fence, because that also looks like it'd be a little plane right there. And one thing that I'm looking at this right now that I really do not like is I hate when blocks like this mash up. I don't know, I just find that to be a weird combination of blocks. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to throw a stair right here. And I know that's a lot of stairs in one spot, but it really does work really well. Now another thing that we can go ahead and we can do is we can just throw random stairs in the corner, or random fences in the corner. I don't know, it just looks really good. It's just another little technique, and we're gonna throw a little stair over the door just to add a little more detail. Maybe even we'll throw a stair next to it to add a little more detail. Maybe we can put a slab next to it. We're just kind of going with the flow, seeing where things work. Like that doesn't really work, so we're just gonna not do that. Maybe throw a trapdoor up there. That doesn't really look like it works, so we're just gonna go ahead and leave it. So this is just, I guess, a bunch of random things in once, just to show you guys, I guess, different techniques of creating, I guess, some depth to your build. Now we're gonna go ahead and copy the roof pattern onto the other side, and we're probably gonna go ahead and do some similar details and depth on the other side. But one thing that I do have now on this side that I do have is not on the other side is I now have a window. One thing to do with windows is you really want to try to put glass panes instead of going with the full glass blocks. The glass blocks do have their own scenarios where they work best, but in most times, if you want to add a little more depth, just go with the glass panes. It just adds a little more detail. One thing that I also want to try to emphasize is adding some detail almost in your glass is also a really good idea as well, because it just looks a lot better. You can do different patterns in it. You can do random things like this. I'm going to try to go more random because I like to try to keep with the whole theme of the build where it is sort of random with the block choice. Now I'm going to go ahead and do some random little details in here, probably not keeping it the same as the other side because I want to try to mix it up a little bit here and there. I like to add a little more detail in different places because it just adds different, I guess, ness to the build. So if you can add a little more difference to the build, that would work out amazing. One thing that I want to emphasize or not show you right here, I'm probably not going to keep this in the build, but trapdoors have this cool, I guess, function where they always tend to come to the bottom or top of a block. So if you add one to the bottom of one block and then to the top of the other, it adds this little, I guess, creates this little arc almost type thing. It's just a little cool trick in Minecraft that I think is pretty cool as well. One other thing that you can do on windows that is pretty cool is adding some flower boxes almost like this and then adding trapdoors on all of them. That's also a really cool thing that you can do in Minecraft. It adds this flower box and you can go ahead and you can just throw some random flowers in there, and I think that turns out really good at the end because it just adds a flower box. I don't know, a flower box is just a cool thing that you can add. It doesn't fit for every build, like it doesn't really seem like it would fit too much for this build, but it does fit for some, so that's why I'm just giving you that option. Now on our final two sides, again, we do need to go ahead and we do need to change up the windows. They don't look too good when you have, again, I'm saying, full glass blocks. It just looks really weird when you have full glass blocks, so I'm gonna go ahead and just mix in some random blocks. Probably gonna do just one of each on each side. So now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add a little more detail on this as well, adding different varying layers of depth. One thing I really like to do, again, is stairs in the corners or slabs in the corners, maybe even fences in the corners or something like that. Maybe leaving one corner open and one corner not open. I don't know, whatever floats your boat. Now I'm trying something different on here. I'm gonna try to add some sort of window covering type thing. So I saw this on, I don't know exactly where, but I took inspiration from somebody. I think it was Green, I'm not exactly sure, but basically what they do is they add some sort of fence gate in their window like this, and then they open it up and it adds almost like a shutter being held up by some little sticks right there. I think that actually looks pretty cool. That's something that I took inspiration from somebody else, so that's also pretty great. That also ties back to my inspiration series that I hope you guys are gonna enjoy. Now on our last side, we're gonna do relatively the same thing as we did on the other side. Nothing too major. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add in the, I guess, fence gate thing that we did on the other side because I think it works really well with this build. Let's go ahead and grab ourselves our trap door. Put that in there like so. I think that looks really cool. I don't know, I just find it really cool. It'd probably work better on a smaller window if this was just a full block right here, but I think it works well either way. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add in some random blocks again, probably do relatively the same thing as the other side because of trying to keep it sort of symmetrical at the same time as not symmetrical. I don't know, I'm just trying to put in random blocks that work well in random places. So that's probably basically our build, and as you can see, we went from something that looked really kind of plain to something that looks a lot more in depth and detailed because we just added random layers to it. So I guess that's where we're going to bring this video to an end. Now, if this video was at all helpful for you guys, if you guys can really start to grasp the idea of how important depth is in a build, definitely show your support by dropping a comment or maybe even a like on this video. And as always, guys, I love you all. See you guys later. Peace out.